What's going on? Today I wanted to review the new Blut record, Disharmonium, Undreamable Abysses. I gotta stop reviewing album names with this one, so it shames me to say it, but historically I have not been the biggest Blut fan. However, this record grabbed me straight away. From the opening notes, I knew that something was different about this record, and I'll get into that obviously more a bit later. But and if you're not familiar, Blut is essentially a solo project. It's not, but it is. There's one creative force behind the band, a guy going by the name of Finsval. He's a French dude, and he's also in the band Forest, who released the record last year that I reviewed. Really enjoyed. Apparently they're releasing them this year, so excited to hear more from him. But he also has a drummer for the band, and I think one other musician, but he's definitely the creative impetus behind all the music. So weirdly, I've seen people saying that they don't enjoy this record, and that it's either, I've seen people saying both, that it's too out there and too similar to other stuff he's recorded. So, I mean, I think that's kind of that shows how polarizing the album is to have complaints kind of on both ends of the spectrum. But if there are other records that sound like this, I definitely need to be introduced to them, because I'm a huge fan of this style of sort of dissonant, chaotic black metal. So, Disharmonium is a positively unwelcoming listen. Seems like Lovecraft is a huge influence behind, probably, I think, the whole project, but definitely behind this record. Track 6 is actually named after a Lovecraft character. But that's sort of just really the vibe that this record has is one of cosmic horror, and it's just got this swirling, non-Euclidean, to use the Lovecraftian trope, sort of a very inhuman type of music on this record. There's a lot of unconventional song structuring, I would say. There are also straightforward parts where you can kind of nod your head and really latch onto something, but that almost makes the disorientation worse, because you'll get this passage where you're like, oh cool, like this is catchy and I know what's going on, and then it'll immediately shift into something else that's just sort of unorthodox and very strange. And that brings me to the drum work, which is just exceptional on this record. The drummer has a really, really good sense of, I don't want to say polyrhythms, because I'm not a drummer and I don't necessarily know that that's intentionally what he's doing, but there's definitely a sense where he kind of overplays a measure, and it feels like the guitars and the drums will sync up every couple measures. But it's clear that like they're playing in time with each other. It's just this very sort of disorienting type of riffing. Yeah, so I mean, it's almost jazzy in a way, in the sense that a lot of it feels very sort of interpretive and kind of played on the spot. I'm sure they knew what they were playing going into the recording process, but it just kind of got that vibe to it. And I mean, I've listened to this record probably 7 or 8 times now, and there are still moments where I can't really get the feel for what the instrumentation is doing. And it's clear that that's because they're such good musicians, not because they have no clue what they're doing. I find that sort of thing enjoyable. It's almost challenging in a way to listen to it. A lot of people, I guess, don't really like that, especially not in black metal. That's fine, but that's definitely what you're getting into with this record, and probably with Blut in general. So instead of talking about specific tracks, because it really is a full album sort of experience, there's no clear like single, no track is clearly better than the others. I'll just say that the album makes great use of dynamics. It's not all fast, it's not all chaotic and unorthodox, like I mentioned. There are moments in sort of almost entire tracks with a more doomy influence that have this sort of plotting quality that really helps to build that sense of unease. And they also almost serve as reprieves for the listener, because your brain doesn't have to work in overtime to get a real sense of what's going on. You can kind of just sit back and enjoy the music a bit more before being thrown back into that maelstrom of chaotic riffing. And I mean, the guitar layering is exceptional. The production is another key player on this record, because it would be very difficult to make a record like this in a lo-fi way. You really have to have a good finger on the pulse of production techniques to be able to make this record sound the way it needs to sound. The leads in particular are really, really great. They've got this sort of distant, unsettling, I mean, they sound like, there's this other trope I'm a big Lovecraft fan. There's this other trope in Lovecraft's writings where you hear sort of buzzing in the air and you can't really locate it. It's just sort of this generalized noise. And that's almost sort of what the leads are evocative of. Very distant. They don't really sit in a clear place in the mix. They're kind of panned, and they're just sort of this oppressive force over you. It just adds a lot to the music to really have that genuinely unsettling sound weaving in and out of the rhythm guitars, which are a lot. I think they're kind of low tuned. I'd be surprised if they're playing an E standard. I think it's down tuned guitars, and that kind of helps fill it out. It's got a very like bassy floor for the leads to sort of build on top of. One last thing I'll touch on is the vocals. Very similar to the Forest album that I reviewed, actually. It seems like there are tracks that don't have vocals at all, and when there are vocals on these tracks, they sort of weave in and out. I think I've even used that as a descriptor for the leads earlier, but that's kind of just the quality that a lot of the pieces of this music have. They'll fade just into your attention, and you can kind of hear what's going on, and then they'll just kind of get quiet and drop out completely. It's just very disorienting quality. You know, it sounds like cultists chanting in the woods or something. It's just a very, very unsettling album. I can see why this wouldn't be for everyone, because I've also seen people describe Blut as a very beautiful project, like musically very beautiful. I wouldn't call this music beautiful, but it's very engaging, both intellectually and just sort of on an aesthetic level. I mean, he really nailed this. So yeah, I mean, if you guys have heard this one, let me know what you think. It seems like a polarizing one, so I'm definitely curious to hear some other opinions on it. I appreciate you guys watching. Give this a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.